Welcome back everybody to the Wandering Samurai Study, in which we review and analyze every single act told in Rurouni Kenshin, and today's act is Act 38, Yutaro's Skill. After the last act, I was kind of wondering what was going to happen between Kenshin and Raijuta that would prevent them from actually having a rematch. I couldn't remember at the top of my head, but I'm so glad that they didn't actually have a fight and that this act was more centered around Yutaro, because we got a lot of Yutaro development and that's something that I liked a lot better than actual Raijuta stuff. I was even annoyed when there is this panel of Raijuta making the first strike, because of course he makes the first strike, but whatever. Let's go ahead and talk about Yutaro after the chapter summary review. Kenshin and Raijuta stare down before their rematch with real swords. The moment is disrupted by Yutaro's father, who brought tea for his guests. Raijuta lays down his sword, telling Kenshin that his only two options are to lend Raijuta a hand or die by his hand. Yutaro comes back into the scene and Yahiko challenges him to a fight. Yutaro shows up early the next morning for his match with Yahiko, but it's quickly revealed that Yutaro hasn't had any actual proper training from his master. Kaoru gives him a lesson and offers Yutaro a chance to enroll in her dojo. The chapter ends with 4 of Raijuta's men ready to ambush the Kamiya Dojo. As I mentioned in the beginning, this act serves to develop Yutaro's character, which is much appreciated. It's much needed. He's not just a kid anymore that is following behind Raijuta. We get Yutaro's motivations. We get to know him as more of a character in this act, and it's honestly a lot compared to everything that we've seen so far in this. We get to know why he wants to be a swordsman. We get to know his relationship with his father. We get to know his relationship with his sensei Raijuta, and we get to know why he hasn't had any formal training. So let's go ahead and start off with why he wants to be a swordsman, as it'll kind of connect to his relationship with his dad. The reason that he wants to be a swordsman is because he has that warrior spirit that Yahiko has as well. He is the descendant of a swordsman just like Yahiko. However, the difference between Yahiko and Yutaro is that Yahiko's parents died and Yahiko's dad died by the sword. Yutaro's dad threw the sword away. And so he has some type of resentment towards his father. He has that innate samurai blood running in him, and so for his father to throw the sword away is very well. Yutaro has a lot of resentment because of that, and that is why he looks up to a man like Raijuta so much, because he wants to keep the swords alive in the current age where his dad decided to throw his sword away. It's almost like Raijuta is filling in this role for Yutaro in his head, mind you, of the person that he wishes his dad really was. And that is opening up this wound for him that is leading to hero worship. Because the relationship that he has with Raijuta, as I mentioned, is he wants this man to be the father figure that his actual father figure isn't. Because of that, Raijuta, we find out, doesn't have any actual intention of teaching Yutaro any swordsmanship, as he's been around the family for a good minute already, but he hasn't actually taught Yutaro even the fundamental basics of how to hold a sword. But because of the way that Yutaro sees Raijuta and how he worships him as a great swordsman, he doesn't seem to mind. He has this idea that maybe someday he'll get some proper training from his sensei, but he doesn't want to be a burden to Raijuta's cause in the Shinko Ryu. So he's allowing himself to be kind of sidelined while his mentor, his sensei, is focusing on his own goal, which really tells us a lot about Raijuta himself, as it's not really anything new. It's been kind of shown in the last previous acts, but he's very selfish. He's very goal oriented and he's very tunnel vision in his goal. He sees something, he wants it. If it serves his purpose, he's gonna go after it. So we know that Yutaro and his family have something that he wants, but Yutaro isn't it, as he doesn't even know how to hold a sword. And knowing that Yutaro's dad threw away the sword, there's something there that Raijuta sees that he wants, or is the reason that he's continuing to stick around. Now, I know what this is, and for a lot of you guys who are familiar with the story, you know what this is, but for the people who don't know what it is, please don't spoil anything down below in the comments. Not that there are a whole lot of comments, but either way. So let's go ahead and talk about Yutaro's dad very quickly. As I've already discussed that Yutaro's dad has thrown away the sword, and this is very key into the narrative as how it fits into the Meiji, how things are different now than they were, as Yutaro's dad was a former samurai, but he threw away the sword as he's become a merchant who is selling his swords to foreigners. He's basically selling out his culture to make $1. And I have to imagine that this isn't very unusual in the Meiji, because the big thing about the Meiji is that this is the first time that the Meiji has opened up its borders to foreigners. This is one of the ways that the Meiji, or Japan, saw to modernization during this era, because one of the goals of the Meiji is to become a country that is involved with world affairs. They want to be at the top. And so they've gone about this with opening up its borders rather than being isolated. And people like Yutaro's dad have taken it upon themselves to sell their culture to foreigners. And that's something that we still see from Japan to this day. One of Japan's greatest exports is its culture. It's the reason why anime is so popular outside of the country as well as inside. It's a reason why their video games are so prominent on the world stage, because they take their culture and export it. And Yutaro's dad is doing this as early as the Meiji. This is where it started, people. Let's talk about the Kamiya Dojo and Yutaro showing up at the dojo for his challenge with Yahiko. I really liked the way that the Kamiya Dojo handled this situation. It really kind of just shows a little bit of their character. I know that there are central casts and there are main characters, so it's in the best interest of the narrative for them to be good people. But, showing is better than telling us. So when it is revealed that Yutaro doesn't know how to hold a sword, I think it would have been really cheap if Yahiko had challenged him anyway, and taking it upon himself to beat somebody who doesn't even know how to properly hold the instrument during their challenge. But he stepped aside and allowed Kaoru to teach him how to hold a sword. Granted, he was phooey about it the entire time, and he was very sourpuss about it, but it still would have been really cheap for him to fight him anyways, and then had a good way to kind of shut him up and close him off entirely. I also just like this as Kaoru sees somebody who's really invested in swordsmanship and kenjutsu, but because they don't have a real teacher, she feels for them and is offering them a free lesson, or at least showing them the basics. Also, being that she's a teacher at this dojo, it's an opportunity for her to recruit, and she jumped on that opportunity. Good for her, because she needs more students. Yahiko shouldn't be the only one. So I like that. This was a good moment for the Kamiya Dojo. It was a good moment for the teacher and for the student. Now let's talk about what I don't like. And that is actually the final thing we're going to talk about. It's the men at the end of the chapter. 4 men are sent to ambush the Kamiya Dojo, and I can't for the life of me figure out why. Now, I know why it's supposed to move the story forward, but just without actually going into that chapter and not knowing what's going on in that chapter yet, I don't like it, because Raijuta is sending 4 of his underlings to come and ambush the dojo. Now, their motivations for why is still unclear, but why would he? Raijuta has already acknowledged the strength of Kenshin. But really, it kind of just boils down to, why did he send these 4 men to try and change or convince Kenshin to join the Shinkoryu if Raijuta has failed to do so yet? Why wouldn't he just do it himself instead of sending 4 people? Now, obviously, we're going to get the answer next week with the next chapter, but it was just like, it was such a good chapter. I really didn't like the way it ended, but it needs to happen to move the story forward. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are at the end of Act 38. Join us next week, and we will cover Act 39 of Rurouni Kenshin. If you like this video and you want to see more, then consider subscribing to the channel. Leave a thumbs up and comment down below something and anything to let me know, what did you think about this act? What did you think about Yutaro's development? What did you think about Yutaros Dad and deciding to throw the sword away to become, well, better off financially? I'll talk to you guys all down below. Bye, ciao.